So my name is Dessalyn Wood. I'm the Chief People Officer here at Thoughtexchange, and I'm going to be talking to you about one of my favorite topics, which is new leader onboarding. I've been talking about this for a while, but I've made some updates recently, largely due to experiences that I'm having in the virtual world of onboarding that has, I think, even made this onboarding experience more important for leaders, and it already was very important. So how we're going to kick it off today is a little bit different. I often do an exchange at the end for Q&A. I thought I would love to find out more about who's here and more about what you think your challenges are around leader onboarding right now. And then hopefully with some interaction, as if you're in the room with me right now, I'll be able to pull from some of the issues that are raised and address them throughout what I'm going to be talking about this morning, which is around new leader onboarding. So the question I have for you are, what are some challenges you faced around new leader onboarding? So those of you who've never been in a thought exchange, there's three things you're going to do. You're going to see a QR code, I'm going to show it in a second, that you can use your phone to click into, or you can actually go in the chat and there's going to be a link to the exchange. You're going to be asked a question, and then you're going to see the thoughts of others pop up. And then as they pop up, you rate them 1 out of 5. So 1 star if you're like, meh, not really something I'm concerned about, up to 5 stars if it's like, oh my God, I should have thought of that. And then we're going to have a look and see what are the challenges that we're being faced right now with onboarding. So we'll have the link in the chat. Just make sure it's in there. There it is. And those of you who are new to QR codes, you just take your phone. If you have a smartphone, put it on camera. You don't take a picture. You hold it up to the QR code. It grabs it. And then you'll go right into the exchange, or you can put a link on the chat. And third choice, tejoin.com with that 9-digit number. That's really if you've got a piece of technology that probably is a little bit fussy. So while we do that, I'm actually going to go in here and press the timer and see what are the challenges that you're having right now with onboarding. What are some challenges? So I'm going to be quiet and we're going to see what your thoughts are. If you don't have a thought, go in anyway, because you can still rate the thoughts of others. So I really want to understand what are the concerns you're facing. Another moment before I look at the thoughts. If you're just arriving late, we're just doing an exchange right now to understand the challenges people are facing so that I can address those throughout my session. So if you're just coming in, there's a link in the chat, or you can use the QR code to participate. If you need me to put the QR code back on, just put that in the chat. Some good ones coming in. Keep going. Again, I encourage you to go in, even if you don't have a thought, to rate the thoughts of others. And I will refer back to these throughout the session. Just a couple more minutes. It's a great way to get to know who's out there. All right, it's looking really good. Another minute and a half or so. So keep sharing your thoughts, and then you can go to rating thoughts. This is amazing. Keep going. It's open for another minute. Last 30 seconds. Just be rating away right now. So I'm going to spend a couple minutes on this now, but I'm actually going to use this to grab from throughout the rest of the hour. So interestingly enough here, top thought so far is the wanting to throw leaders in the deep end right away. So the pressure that we have, it says eager to leaders working right away without giving them the time and space to build relationships and learn the ropes. Well, welcome to what we're doing in right now. We're actually going to talk about exactly that tendency and the pitfalls of doing that. Leadership buy-in. Many feel that they should learn in an unstructured way and just get thrown in. So yes, unstructured is not the answer that I'm going to be saying today. I'm going to be talking about structure, which is actually quite sensitive, especially when people are very seasoned, or like we say, but right here in the other thought is there's a lot of pressure. Time and resources, exactly. There's a lot of time and resources that are to do it right, and we often are under-resourced and therefore cut corners here. Remote work, definitely remote has made it even more challenging. If you're putting out fires, who has time to onboard? Yes, we want people to jump in right away. And that's the thing here is the expectations being at 100%. So these are amazing thoughts. I am going to visit them again. So don't worry, you didn't do all that work for nothing. But I just wanted to see where we're at as a group today. So in onboarding, we're going to be talking about really why it's neglected. So in talent management, there's so many processes like coaching and one-on-ones and performance evaluation and talent mapping. And we don't really talk about sort of the Cinderella at the ball, which is onboarding. It's actually not really effective. So, 30% of external hires that are executives often are seen as failures within 2 years, and 23% of internal transfers to senior roles. So this is quite a high failure rate. If you knew that there was a program you were going to go into with that higher failure rate, you're probably pretty nervous about what your outcome was going to be. Another thing that we know about onboarding, there's so many studies. McKinsey looks at a bunch of studies, and in their studies, they say it's anywhere between 27 and 46% in the studies reviewed that were regarding these leader transfers and integrations as either failures or disappointments. So I don't know if there's anyone who wants to say in the chat if you've had that experience before, either in your own integration, I don't know if you want to say that, having it be a failure, or that in the integration of others. Now, interestingly enough, the reason I actually started this work is that I had a period in my career that about every 3 years I made a move into a fairly seasoned role, taking over established teams. And it was through that, trial and error of my own onboarding that I started to think I wanted to design onboarding where I would be successful. So it was actually incredibly selfish, but what you're seeing here today is the result of my own experiences, as well as what I'm facing now, which is in a high growth company, so many leaders and also remote. So, the other neglected area of onboarding is really this idea of addressing with the actual leader themselves why they think they're not being successful. So of all those leaders we just talked about who are struggling, 67% of them said it was the organizational politics were their main concern. And they said that, I'm trying to make change quickly and the politics are getting in the way. So if I zip back to that exchange, there was a thing about 2 or 3 thoughts that I saw really quickly that were mentioning somebody coming in and trying to hit the ground at 100% without actually having a proper time to onboard and integrate. And so the tension is already starting where leaders are saying, I can't get things done quickly. And one of the biggest concerns is you're trying to go too fast. And so, just even addressing that right off would probably have a pretty big impact, which is your desire to get things done quickly without the relationships. So why do current onboarding programs often miss the mark? Well, I actually saw that in the exchange. One of the things that was raised is that, we actually don't put in traditional onboarding all the different facets of the organization's culture and the team's dynamics in it. And we really focus more on the status quo. So what's the status quo of onboarding? Well, it actually starts with this probably the image you weren't expecting to see, this big, I think, misconception. And that's especially as we get to more senior roles and we get to external hires. There's this perception that this person that you've sourced and interviewed and everybody's really excited about through the interview process is going to come here and save the company from all the mediocre decisions made before they got here. So there's almost like this God complex for new leaders, which is like, oh my gosh, all those wonderful things you did in your past role and that you talked about in your interview, you're just going to descend from the heavens and be successful here. And because we get excited about the person and in the interview, they feel that excitement and confidence of the people interviewing them, they might tend to think that they don't have to do all the work to get integrated in order to have an impact. So this savior God complex, I think, is one of the problems that we have, is that we fall in love during the interview process and we really underestimate the amount of tension that new leaders bring to an organization. So because of this underestimation, a lot of the status quo onboarding is technical. So it's like getting your technology, making sure you do your compliance training, and telling you, either to have a virtual or a live coffee with everybody. And it's like, that's kind of it. And it's, there's a week where the person's sort of adjusting and asking lots of questions, again, mostly about technical things. And then the assumption is they're just going to get going in their job. Now, the other thing we make a terrible mistake about is the team probably just lost a leader that they might not have been in love with, but they really knew well. And what we do is we underestimate the amount of stress a new leader brings to a team. This person has control over your salary, over your growth, over your promotions, and always say things as like, don't worry, you're going to love them. So we essentially have a leader thinking, I have all the answers, everybody loves me, a team where we really underestimate the complexity of the relationship, and then we send them off with this concern that you're just going to love them, so you don't have to think about it at all. So what happens here is there's a lot of oversimplification. So the oversimplification here is the trap is that we assume that their transferable skills mean we don't need any structure. So I saw inside the exchange that we had, somebody mentioned there's sort of this, kind of disgust for structure because there's this assumption that structure is for people who don't know what they're doing, and people who do know what they're doing need a lot of autonomy. Now, I'm going to actually tell you, I could do a whole workshop on that. Autonomy is literally the most important thing you can give somebody once they understand the lay of the land. But autonomy without that actually can be disastrous. So we have a couple of oversimplification traps. Now, when you're an internal promotion, what we tend to do is we overestimate the value of their understanding of the team and culture because they were part of this company before, and we tend to underestimate the complexity of the role change. So again, you've been really successful here, you seem to know how to do everything, we're just going to cut and paste you over here, and we don't necessarily lay out, here's all the different things this role requires, where are your gaps, and how in the onboarding plan are we going to fill those gaps? And so again, there tends to be about a week of sort of like, just shadowing and job shadowing, very informal. And then we toss that internal promotion into a role where they're probably not technically that strong. We haven't identified the gaps, and therefore the plan does not address those gaps. The oversimplification trap that we have for external hires is quite the opposite. So with internal hires, we overvalue what you know about the organization and culture, and we undervalue your knowledge gap. When you come from externally, we actually overvalue your knowledge and role because you've come from likely doing something that we're really excited about, or we wouldn't have hired you. So we're excited about the knowledge you bring, but we underestimate the importance of understanding the culture and the team. So it's really interesting. We see internal promotions have a lot of support initially because they get the culture and team, but then there's some doubts about their abilities as we go on. And then we have the opposite reaction with an external hire where we're like, oh my God, they've done such amazing things, but it doesn't seem to be working out here because they don't seem to get the team and the culture. So really both these traps, although they're the opposite with one or the other, are related to us really not fully understanding that transferable skills, whether it's about the corporate culture and team or about your role, are not enough. You still need a plan. In general, I think that new leaders fall into about these three categories. Don't ask me where I got this. This is just my own observation. I call it the been there, done that, which is really the God complex. And that's where somebody who has transitioned multiple times, feels that they understand it, just wants to get their technology up and running, wants to understand a couple of the systems, and is like, I don't need to be there. They basically self-select out of any onboarding activities. This usually is one of the biggest, I would say, stressors on existing teams and peers, is someone who really has devalued that entire part of the experience intentionally. Again, we don't have a lot of people like that, but I actually don't blame it on the individual. I blame it on the savior, interview process that, allows the person to come in feeling that they don't need to know those things. The second group, I call them the really excited to learn. They're like, oh my God, I'm so excited. And that's often an internal promotion. So they're really excited because they got a promotion to a big role. Or it could be somebody that we did bring in externally, but from a different kind of role where they're well aware that they don't know this role yet. This person is also often very excited and then starts to feel like that person on the spaceship movies that's out taking care of the space arm who gets disconnected and floats away. This person often ends up feeling really under supervised or not getting enough support. So we have the one who says, I don't want any. We have one who just wishes they had more, again, without structure. And then we have the majority of new leaders, which are people who are really excited about their role, internal or external, but they get swept away into that meeting vortex that I saw mentioned in our exchange, which is that we just need them right away. So we just say, you know what, you don't really need to worry about getting adjusted here in this role or with this team. We just need you to fix this and go to this meeting and go to this offsite or that conference. And what ends up happening is the intention is to come back and start again, but it actually doesn't work for a couple of reasons. One, calendars just get more and more full. I don't ever see a calendar getting less full over time. Don't know if you do. The other thing is that there's this thing that happens in those first few weeks, which is people sort of decide what kind of person and leader you're going to be. And even if you try to go back and do a do-over, it's not like the cassettes from the 90s. It's not like you get to rewind yourself. People are already established that you have not prioritized getting to know the team, the culture of your role. It's hard to do a do-over. So when you're thinking of onboarding, you have to think that regardless of whether someone's seasoned, new to a role, internal transfer, whatever it is that all phases of onboarding, because I have 3 separate phases, need to involve these 3 aspects. We need to focus on the role, we need to focus on the team, we need to focus on the culture. So regardless of what phase you're in your onboarding journey, there are these 3 components that do require attention. I often get asked this. It's the question of anybody who's been in learning and development for my entire career is, how long is this going to take? There's this desire that we want to shortcut everything. We're people who cut corners, we're corner cutters, and we're in a culture of imagined emergency. So we think everything has to be done right away. And so I often get asked, well, how long is this going to take? Well, traditionally, onboarding to me is basically the same amount of time it takes to make a baby. It's about 9 months. And I say that even though it's 6 to 9 months for external hires, you could say 3 to 9 months for internal, is that most onboarding is bumpy. So those months are not structured. It's basically the time it takes for the person to be really productive without all the drama that's caused around their productivity. And so what we really want to do is not just reduce the amount of time by doing it right. My timing is about 4 months. We also want to reduce the amount of damage that's done to that person, to the team, and to the trust between them in that time. So we're trying to have a shorter and less dramatic period that's more productive. Can it go faster? I think with structure. And I think that's the hardest thing, is that in North America, we're really, really against structure. A lot of people feel structures like micromanagement. They see, a lot of structures meaning we don't trust somebody, or we're not going to give you any leeway or freedom. But in fact, you need a plan in order to go fast. We have a saying here at Thoughtexchange, which is measure twice and cut once. And so, there's so much time saved by getting it done right, but that does take a little bit of time. And so what I'm going to be focusing on today is the whole aspect of what we do to plan our onboarding in order to have a plan when that person starts. Because if we don't have a plan, the likelihood that we're going to make one 2 weeks after they start goes down as they're swallowed into the meeting vortex. Why does this matter to me? Well, I can tell you that 26% of the leaders at Thoughtexchange right now in 2021 are either newly hired or internal promotions. We're in a huge growth phase. And so I have, 1 in 4 of my leaders is new to either leading or to leading at Thoughtexchange this year. If my stats are accurate from the research here, 3 out of 10 of these leaders won't be successful. That's a lot of effort that we've put into to post these positions, to interview extensively, to get everybody on board, to know that without strong onboarding, we won't have a success rate of 100%. And there's also something interesting. I was reading up that there's a lot of research that talks about, you know, confidence that people have in executive decision making goes down if the leaders they hire are not successful. So literally the confidence in my own decision making will be challenged if the people we bring in are not able to be successful. So a lot on the line. So that's again why I'm here today. So we're revamping our new leader plan, and I'm going to show you today what it is that we're doing with our plan. So why do we need a plan? I'll give you a moment to read this quote. Yogi Berra, a little bit of a baseball humor here. You need to know where you're going because in the end, you're going somewhere anyway. So that's what's so interesting is that idea that onboarding takes 6 to 9 months or 3 to 6 months. That just is talking about how long it takes for all the pain and suffering around onboarding to happen. So if you don't set a course, you might end up somewhere where you didn't expect, which is usually with a new leader who feels like they have to clean house because they feel like they just don't, get the team, they're not connecting with the team, or the team themselves feeling like this leader is not the right leader for them and pushing back hard on that. And those are usually the result of us not being intentional about how we onboard people. So the leader onboarding that we're looking at today has 3 phases. It has a pre-boarding phase. So think of it like on a plane. Before you even get on the plane, what are all the things that need to be in place? And then we have what we call the first 30 days. So most onboarding you'd think would start at number 2. It's the day they get there. I'm actually going to spend the majority of what we're talking about today on pre-boarding and actually invite you back for the next 2 sessions, which will be the first 30 and go live at 120. So the third stage is really when I call the go live date. Go live is when I'm actually assuming that you're going to be fine on your own without all the support that you needed during your initial onboarding phase, but we're still paying attention to you. So to me, when you're still under that year, you're going to need some check-ins, but they're going to start to reduce as your competence and your confidence are increasing. As I said before, each of those phases focuses on the role of the team and the culture. So in pre-boarding, we focus on the 3. That means before you even start, we're going to focus on the role, the team, and the culture. And then in your first 30, we focus on the role of the team and the culture. And then at that go live date, we have really clear expectations around the role of the team and the culture as well, so that your momentum is that you're on your way, you're moving fast, and you're moving fast in the right direction. So pre-boarding, anybody who enjoys pre-boarding will enjoy this, which is how do we get you ready before you even start? Well, this is a big thing that's especially important when you're remote, which is that it's really scary to feel like your first day, you're actually just in your house. Nothing has happened and you're supposed to be in a new job, in a new culture with a new team. So getting this right is exponentially worse when you don't for remote workers. So what happens in pre-boarding? Well, I'll get a little bit more into this. So this is just a snapshot. It's obviously the obvious things, which is like welcome packages and tech and setting up specific, happy hours or meet and greets for this person, as well as sharing all your employee resource groups, your resources around DE&I so that people can see that there's a lot of places they can belong and feel included. And then what I'm going to talk about after are guides. One of the really important things I found happen at Thoughtexchange happened to me. So I started in 2019, finishing my other job, didn't have a big gap between I started this new job. And I'd say probably it was over a week before I started, I got this big surprise. It was a package. I open it up and it's my laptop and it's my phone and it's before I even started. And first of all, who doesn't like to get technology in the mail? The second was I ended up having a call with a wonderful person at Thoughtexchange who actually set me up. So I got my email set up, my calendar set up, everything was done before. And when I opened my calendar, I saw that I actually already had meetings planned. Now, this might sound silly, but my confidence in being a remote worker just shot straight up because I didn't have to think of like, what's happening the first day? What do I even do? Where do I go? All this was done ahead of time. And it also showed like really good trust that I had the technology and I had all my login, but I hadn't actually had my first day yet. And so that meant my first day, I would actually already ready to go. We also send out in our welcome package, we have a benefit that Dave just wrote a book called Scaling Conversations. What I'm showing you here is you want to send as much as you can about the company, the history, your business model. You can send it, via, packages. You can send a link to a folder that the person can get on Dropbox, whatever you can that can help the person know as much as they can ahead of time. In this knowledge era, obviously people can Google and read what they want online, but it's really fun to see, the last, maybe PowerPoint from the company strategy session, understand what the team's goals are. And in our case, in our Scaling Conversations book, it has the origin of the company. It has the reason why we exist. And so people now can see and understand a lot before they start and actually feel like they kind of got a scoop before they got in there. We also created a YouTube video that actually shows the company. It shows our different office spaces. We are a remote company, but we have some shared office spaces, so people can get like a virtual tour and see, what it looks like. And that's, I think, really important to do, because it's hard when you're out there to have not had that connection. And in this era that we just went through and with COVID, I've had 4 team members, all hired between a year up until this January, whom I've never actually physically met. And so how do those team members integrate if they have no reference point? We also are founded in a really small town in BC, so it's great in the video to see, Thoughtexchange in its origins and feel a bit of a connection there, so that you're not sitting there on the massive Zoom call being like one of the percent that actually doesn't actually understand where the company was founded or what it looks like. We also send this exchange right away before you start. So we ask, what advice can you give your new TE colleagues to help them have an excellent start? So imagine you don't have any friends, because that's what it's going to be like. You don't really know anybody, but you get this package before you start that has all this advice from people who really want you to be successful. And so we're actually revamping it now because we have so many new people. I'm curious to hear what their advice will be. And so this comes in, it's actually a crowd favorite. I often get feedback that I loved reading that report. You just read all the different thoughts around people's experiences here. The one in the bottom right, I find really interesting. It says structure changes frequently. Don't panic if you move teams or change bosses. It's to be expected. These are little nuggets that probably you wouldn't find out for quite a while, but will really make you feel like you have a strong bonded connection and that you're starting to build trust with colleagues that you haven't met. And that's really important, is that you feel like you belong, that you're wanted, and you build trust. And this is especially important right now because bias plays a lot of role in onboarding. People from similar backgrounds who have similar experience and similar cultures are going to be trusted faster. And we're also going to probably have more empathy for the struggles they're going to have because we're rooting for them because they're part of our group. We often don't feel the same for somebody who's from a different background or has a different experience. That person coming in, we're likely to be more suspicious of what they do, more suspicious of what they know, and probably a little more likely to hold back. This has happened to all sorts of different people I've spoken to. You can be, coming from the public sector, going into the private sector, the other way around, and people be like, you don't know this, you're from the public sector, you're from the private sector. When I got to Thoughtexchange, there was definitely a feeling that I came from a corporate background, and this is a tech startup. It was like, don't bring your corporate stuff here. So there's a feeling right away that maybe I'm not going to be trusted. So all the things I'm talking about is trying to create that feeling of connection with people that they are going to have trouble doing remotely, but they might even have more trouble because the group sees you as an out-group person. So we know already from bias training that we have in-groups and out-groups, and we have a lot of trust and empathy for somebody who's in our in-group, and we have a lot of distrust for people in the out-group. So the onboarding program has to address building trust at scale, especially if you're pushing to have people from different backgrounds who are going to challenge your business model, bring you innovative thinking. You have to know that they're going to have that much harder a time getting buy-in from their team and peers because they're not from the same group. So what in your onboarding program addresses that? I like this idea, this musical chairs, is that if you want to be inclusive in your onboarding, you have to stop the music and add a chair or else the person can't play. So the point being is that this rushing that I saw in the exchange, which is like, we just got to rush because we got to hit the ground running, pressure, pressure, pressure. That's even harder when we have to slow down a little bit and acknowledge that there's going to be some differences of opinion and some different ways of doing things. And we have to create space and build trust for those people, or the person won't have the impact that they expected. Now, this is actually even harder to think about when you think about the idea that leaders are supposed to be servant style leaders, meaning that I'm supposed to be here to serve my team. But there's one thing that I've learned over the years, and this has never been proven wrong, is that if you're leading while you're learning, it's messy. Leadership is supposed to be a selfless act. Leadership is supposed to be me paying attention to all the cues of my team and my peers and my boss, and I'm supposed to be reading those all, filtering them out, and being attentive to everybody. Well, learning is something that's actually very self-centered. So when I'm learning to try to figure my way out to make sure that I'm okay, I'm actually thinking a lot about me and I'm pretty stressed about my own success and safety. And so when you're stressed about your own success and safety, it's not going to be your best self. Think about like being hungry and kind of snap at people. Well, learning is like being hungry for information and for competence and confidence. And then people are pressing on you to do things for them. You're likely not going to show up as your best self. I refer to situational leadership. You can use anything you want, but I think this is a really interesting thing to say. You know, any leadership model you follow, there's different leadership styles. And most people say, well, I know what my leadership style is. So the ones on the right here, the two, 1 and 2, the orange and red, those are the more controlling directive styles, meaning, you know, when I'm the red kind of leader, I like to have all the details laid out and I like people to follow what I'm doing. When I'm in the yellow, when I'm in the orange, I like to coach people, but I still have my own plan. So essentially, these are leadership styles that are more directive or controlling. The ones on the left are the leadership styles that are more supportive. You know, I'm trying to help you make your own decision, right on to I'll delegate and get out of the way. So we call those more supportive, less directive. So typically leadership styles people think are pretty set. Most people sort of have a preferred style. And when you ask people what their preferred style is, which is what a team does when someone starts, they often talk about how they're more of a empower you, let you do your thing kind of leader. And that's actually true once they're onboarded and feeling good. So once I know my role and I know what you do and I trust you, I'll let you go. But in fact, the experience you have of a new leader is not of these styles that let go. They're often more controlling. And the reason being is the leader is learning. So in situational leadership, we see you go from low competence to high competence. So the idea is that I'm supposed to be doing both leading, like I'm leading you because I'm your leader from day one, and I'm learning at the same time, which means that I'm actually looking to you, my team and peers, to help guide me. So you can see how this nuance of I'm your leader, but you're leading me through my onboarding creates some tension if we don't name it. But if you actually name to the team that during the onboarding process, it's going to be up to you to lead while they're learning, and this is a normal part of onboarding, then we see a lot of the tension that's created go away. Because the truth is, people who are learning tend to use more controlling styles, meaning they appear to look more micro. They ask for a lot of details. They want to check in on everything. They want a lot of, understanding. They want to attend all the meetings with their team. And this is perceived as micromanagement when it really should just be perceived as learning. So we really have to talk to our teams before they start about how are you going to lead your new leader in their onboarding so that they learn about the team, they learn about the culture, or if they're an internal transfer or promotion, that they learn about the role from you and that you don't see it as deficient, that you have to show them things. I often hear teams say like, I don't know, they're the new boss, but I'm the one who's leading and teaching them everything. Well, that's part of the whole onboarding process, is that the leader needs to learn from you. And so when we underestimate the complexity of this, we really end up setting people up to fail because the leader ends up feeling a little bit embarrassed or shunned or shamed for having needs. And their team is frustrated to have to pause their day to day to help out this person who's supposed to know more than them. So we really need to name that dynamic before we start, or else this kind of tension will start between the groups of me feeling like I'm not being accepted and the team feeling like that this leader is either too needy or too micromanaging. So what we've decided here is we're going to work with guides. So typically in onboarding, we have the person's hiring managers assumed to be the person who's going to do all the leading. Now, I think we saw that in the exchange. There's often a lot of time pressure, and especially the more senior the person is who's the hiring manager, the less they probably plan to follow a structure. It's just the way it is. You know, they brought you in and they're like, I didn't bring you in here for me to have to spoon feed you, but that kind of work is necessary. You really do need somebody to give you all those details. So if you think about the idea of guides, we can say that there's multiple people that you can establish relationships who have different responsibilities in your onboarding process. So they actually provide context to the current state. So before you freak out about everything's so different here and you have a God complex and you think you're going to save us all, understand what the current state is and why. Doesn't mean you're not going to be right, but you're going to be listened to and you're going to have a lot more impact if you understand current state. These guides make key introductions so that you have a network built. So back to my Zoom screen of cats, is that you won't naturally have a network, and that network is really important for you to be successful. So the guides will make those introductions and help fast track those relationships. And they also become trusted people you can go to. So it's really lonely, you're remote, you're a new leader. Who is your go-to person? Who's your appropriate outlet to go like, is this crazy? Am I crazy? You need to have people who are self-identified as people you can go and talk to. So I look at the three aspects of onboarding and think you need a guide for each one. I think it's not healthy to have the same person assigned to all three because A, they're going to get really busy. And I think it's really important that new leaders have an established group of people they can go to bounce things off of and get input and advice. You don't want to have too narrow a place to talk about here. So there's a role guide. The role guide to me is your manager, your hiring manager. They're the people who talk to you about expectations, strategy, budget, deliverables. They're your leader. This is important because they're accountable for those things as well. The team guys, so how to strengthen your understanding of the team. I actually think it should be somebody who's a senior team member of your team. So people often say, well, I think it should be a peer. I don't want my team to be teaching me. Like, you already saw, I don't agree with that. You're learning. They are actually far more experienced in how the team works than anyone else. And I think it's great for you to have a strong bond with these seasoned people on your team. The last kind of guide is the culture guide. And I say it's usually a member of the people team. It doesn't have to be, but that's somebody who understands all things about the company culture. And I want to be clear here. Just because you're understanding everything doesn't mean you're not allowed to have your own opinions as a new leader. But I believe your opinions and ideas and changes will be that much more impactful and I would say, accepted if you've been guided through your role, your team, and your culture before you bring about your changes. So in pre-boarding, there's the one last thing you want to do before all this. So you've set them up with technology, you've set them up with guides. It'd even be great if the guides had a quick call with the people before they started. Again, everything you can do before day one. The person has a calendar that they can access. They can see that things are already booked. So they're like, I'm going to be okay. So a lot of safety concerns are gone. We do one last thing here. And this is something that I feel is like one of the most important things we do at Thoughtexchange. And I actually, when I was in my past role and used Thoughtexchange as a VP of talent, was something I did with new leaders, which is launch an exchange about what's important for us, the leader, to know about the team and the organization in order to be successful. So actually crowdsource with the people around who are going to be in the circle of influence of this person, what's important for them to know, because they necessarily won't have the time to meet everybody one-on-one. And in a remote world, it takes longer to build trust. So how do we get that information to you quickly? Because that information is going to be vital to your first 30 days. So here's the one I did for me when I started 2 years ago. What's important for me to know about the team and our objectives so I can best support you in my new role. So this goes out. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to find out before I even start what people think I need to be doing. So some of the top thoughts were really about meeting the whole team. Other ones were talking about senior leadership versus, don't keep your head in the clouds. I actually got a ton of different thoughts, and they're all themed automatically in our tool. And if you see here, some of the interesting things is I got a lot of themes around the team. I got themes around culture, and I got themes around the role, but essentially all of them fell into those three bucket categories. So before I even start, I'm like, all right, so I have all this intel that it would have taken me, I don't know how long to hear, especially as a senior leader. People often a little bit hesitant, to be really honest with you. And then I can come about in my first company meeting, which I did, with, okay, I've heard what you're expecting from me, and here, and manage expectations. This is where I'm going to be focusing my time. Didn't think this was a priority, but it's going to be one for me now. And I was able to build trust at scale. And really, that's our responsibility when we're onboarding leaders, is to allow them to build trust, not with 2 or 3 people, but at scale, so that they have the buy-in to be able to move fast. So this whole idea of moving fast is often a problem because people don't have context, they don't have guides, and nobody buys into their ideas. And we can support all of that. So, the optimal transition for a remote leader is that we help them build that trust quickly. And we make that one of our priorities. We don't leave people with no strong relationships out there to suffer. And so when I look at my established relationships chart here, in order for people's changes to be welcomed and for people to get behind them, they really have to have established or trusting relationships. So to think that somebody who's in that very initial getting to know you phase or just developing relationships is going to be successful at bringing in new ideas, that's a recipe for disaster. So what we really want to say is in that 4-month period, which I'm going to be taking you through now over the next actual couple of months if you come back, is what are we doing over that time to get to trusted so that the person can have huge momentum within those first 6 months. So I did want to share with you before we end here today that we actually have a real life case study, because I told you I'm actually doing this work right here, right now, because I have this 26% of new leaders hired or promoted in 2021. And so what I want to talk here is that we have a new director of customer success. So we actually did something different here as well. This was a new role. So I had said pre-boarding starts with all the stuff you need for the person. But I actually think one of the things about pre-boarding is it really should be building trust and inclusion from the first day. If you have a brand new role, it's really interesting to do a crowdsourcing exercise in what the role expectations are. Because interestingly or not, probably not to many of you, new roles often have different expectations depending on who you ask. So if we're creating a new role, the person's direct leader sees that as they're going to take a lot of work from them. The executive probably thinks they're going to do new work that wasn't done before. The team thinks they're going to come in and help me with my workload. And so what ends up happening is this job that was never defined before has different versions of success by different people. So you can see in an onboarding process, really confusing for somebody to be successful when, depending who they're talking to, they're hearing success looks like for me something very different than it looks like for everybody else. So what we did for this new director of CS is we actually crowdsourced within our organization what are the most important things we should be looking for in this role. Now, if you look here, we had 37 people contribute 35 ideas on what they thought it should be. Typically the number of people involved in designing a job are like the person, the leader, and maybe the people team and maybe 2 other people. And in an interview process, even in a really thorough one, it's maybe 9 people are involved. Here we got 37 people's input on what they thought success would look like for this role. And it's really interesting because you see one group saying here, extensive experience is important. Somebody talked about self-serve software experience. This person talked about they should be able to work across teams. So we're really seeing here are the versions of success for me. So defining that made us do a stronger job posting and a better interview process. So right away, we built trust at scale before we even selected our person. And you can see here the themes here. We have themes around the team. People are worried about team. People are worried about the person's role. And then they're also worried about our culture. So right here, we see that there was concerns about inside the job to have all of this represented. And what I love about guides is guides can take you through your new leader exchange, like the one I showed you, or this results, and actually help the new person understand those 3 parts of their role so that they don't think just because I'm experienced, I don't need to think about the team and culture, or just because I'm an internal transfer, I don't need to think about any of these things myself because I'm going to hit the ground running. So my patient zero, the person I'm going to be taking you through a live case study over the next 3 months is Libby. So Libby is joining us on June 21st. She was hired after that process as our Director of Customer Success. It's a new role. And so we're literally live going to take you through the new leader onboarding with Libby. We're actually having her as our guest in 30 days. So Libby's new leader exchange was actually launched yesterday. She's starting next Monday, so that's just perfect. We're getting a few days of that. So in our first day, her guides can actually start to address what's in the exchange and help her work through prioritizing her first month based on what we've heard is important to all the stakeholders in her role. So this is her exchange, and I actually am going to do something a little risky here. Just going to refresh. It just went live, so I'm just going to look here. So right now we see that we have 9 thoughts in there right now. And in those 9 thoughts, we can look over here and see already that people are giving some input for what she needs to do. So we have that they deeply understand your product. We have somebody saying, slow is fast for us. If you look down over here, you can see join customer calls. So this is really exciting. Libby, if you're watching this, you might be excited to see that we already have input from all parts of the company into what you should be focusing on in your first 30 days. And so that's a really wonderful, inclusive way to start her off. The other thing here is that we have her onboarding plan. We've already started to identify the guides and what they're going to be doing in those first meetings. So again, part of it will be debriefing all this information that we have for her. And the second part will be making sure we have intentional meetings that go all the way through so that we support her onboarding when it comes to her role, the team, and our culture. And of course, we have set up for her an onboarding plan in our LMS. So all of this is done before day one. So one of the concerns I saw earlier was, what do we do when people, we have so much pressure to get started right away? One of the misses is that by not having a plan ready that the person's seen and gotten excited about, it's really easy to jump over onboarding. When, if I think of Libby, she knows already, she's going to have all her technology. She has the new leader exchange. She's going to be excited about her onboarding and less likely to think I'll circle back after I put out a fire. So as I summarize, and before I go back to the exchange we did before, leader onboarding has 3 phases. So I've already gone through pre-boarding quite in detail, and then we're going to hit the ground running. So we haven't even hit her first day. Her first day is June 21st, and those first 30 days, we're going to dive into what the role is about. We're going to dive into the team. We're going to dive into the culture with our guides, and we're also going to make sure that we do a really strong foundation before she creates her 90-day plan. This is really interesting because in a lot of organizations, people create 90-day plans before they even start. It's part of the interview process. So the idea that I should know what my priorities are before I started is actually one of the issues that gives you a bit of a God complex. So I love this idea of like, hey, just come and learn for 30 days, then create your 90-day plan. So I'm going to take you through that next month. And then we're going to talk about the final stage, which is at what point does this all come together and the person goes live. So next up, Libby's their first 30 days. I'm hoping you're going to be back for that. And to wrap it up, leader onboarding, for me, 3 stages. Pre, first 30, go live. We focus on the team, the culture, and the role. We have specific points that we've hit where people are going to interact with you. So we know the leader's not going to be alone with a small echo chamber. We have their new insights exchange, like we just launched for Libby. We're going to talk about what you do with your 90-day exchange, and then finally how you launch yourself into your go live with another exchange. And then because this was a new role, I actually did a first exchange, which was the crowdsourcing role expectations. And that's the exchange I showed you that her leader, Michaela, did in order to ensure that we were all on the same page about the role so that Libby would be even that much more successful before we even knew it was going to be Libby. And so summary, pre-boarding starts before day 1. New leader exchanges, hugely important to start with that information. Before you've made your decisions about what you need to prioritize, see what the organization's saying and respond to it. So once you've responded to it, you're going to start establishing trust right away because you've listened and you've integrated this information in your first communication. And we have to make sure that those guides are there to help our team. So I thought I will check over here. I can see there's some stuff going on in the chat. And I wanted to go back to our first exchange. So if we look over here, our first exchange, actually, I think it's in the chat for me. There we go. All right, so I'm on my dashboard here. So you can see right away that I've had a lot of wonderful participation. And what were our thoughts over here? So I just want to go back here and see that we have actually addressed some of these thoughts. So leadership buy-in. Many feel that they should learn in an unstructured way and get thrown into the job. So you can see that having that exchange, I'll tell you, it's a humbling experience. That's what it is. I was humbled by it, and it never surprised me how often people are. I was just speaking to our head of product on Friday who had the New Year exchange, and he said, I don't know what I would have done without those insights. Like coming into a role that's key and critical and having so much insight, and it's all themed for you. I don't know, this one's probably, our theming is probably on its way here right now. When you see over here, you actually can see all the data come in. And you can actually understand that there's a few big areas, a few big buckets you need to look at. And so you will, be less likely to fall into one of the big traps, which is new leaders often see 1 or 2 things in their first couple of weeks and they focus on that. They're like, that's the biggest thing we need to fix. But in the grand scheme of everything that's going on in the role in the organization, likely what they first saw and noticed is not the most important thing. And I've seen this happen for all sorts of situations where a leader sort of sticks on to something, an irritant that they found in their first couple of weeks and goes on and on about it and starts to lose credibility because we're like, really, that's what you care about? But the point is that's all they know about. So if we don't want to have those moments, what we need to do is give them a full picture of information so that they can go, oh my God, there's this much going on. And we look at this, it's like, oh my gosh, I need to think about leadership. I need to think about onboarding. So I actually get this, I would call it a good ego check that I don't have all the answers, and I'm going to need to, be more attentive to what's going on in the organization. What else did we have here? Just want to look here for my thoughts to make sure I responded to them, because I want to wrap us up at 5:02 and check the chat for my questions. So, wanting to throw leaders into the deep end right away. So again, you brought this up before. We want to throw them right away. That's because we haven't really made time to understand the implications of that. So my view is, if you have people who are saying we just got to get them going right away, is that what you're going to get going right away is a hot mess. You're going to get going somebody who's going to have no context, going to start to probably make comments that people find a little bit offensive because it shows a lack of curiosity. You're going to end up with so many more issues by throwing someone in the deep end. And the thing is, like I said before, you can't rewind your start. You can't. What ends up happening is that this is the people's experience of you. So my view is that if you want to measure twice, cut once, is that I can get you a leader ready faster with you not having them start being supposedly effective on day one, because effective on day one is actually long-term ineffective. Those are the people who end up, being considered failures or disappointments. Time and resources. Hopefully you can use some of the structure I showed you here. I've grown my career with very limited resources, always working in industries that were very, very tight and cost effective. And so any tools that I show, I really made a commitment, are cost effective and going to drive a lot of value. So if you're curious to know about what I'm doing with my onboarding plan, I'm happy to share it. You can link in with me on LinkedIn, and I also can take you through the exchange cadences, which give enough value for us to use as a resource. So that's the whole thing, is as long as something gives value, it's worth the time and energy. During remote work, it's been hard to connect with their teams and create a vision. So you can see how many connections we've had for Libby already. Her team and peers already weighed in on what the job probably needs to be. They've weighed in, or starting to weigh in on what they think her first 30 days will be. And we're going to have them also participate in, giving feedback on the 90-day plan and feedback on, 4 months and beyond. So this is a really wonderful way to increase connection. And I'll talk more in my next session at in a month on how do you create connections throughout the organization in those first 30 days. So I'm looking here to see if there's anything that I need to jump to. I like to do the word cloud because it sends me words that I probably did not look at. I like to look quickly here. Quickly connecting leaders with their teams. Need to get to know their strengths and weaknesses as well as working for them. Yeah, you need to connect them, but guess what? Teams are nervous to meet their new leader, and they're probably not going to be open about their challenges with them, because this is a little bit of a showcase to try to promote myself as being a wonderful employee. So one of the really interesting things you do in this exchange is you can ask people, what are some of the challenges the team are facing, or what are some obstacles that that are important for me to know? And I find that new leader exchange allows people to voice things that they probably wouldn't do in a coffee, virtual or live, because I'm too nervous to look good. So here, that connection is that once a team leader can address, this is what the team is struggling with, these are the obstacles that they have to their success, and I can commit to that success, well, then you're more likely to build trust with me quickly. I'm just going to do a quick check here in the chat to see if there's anything I've missed as we're coming up in the last couple of minutes. So first, I wanted to thank everybody for this. Big thing here is that I'm going to be coming back in a month. We're going to post that to you, anybody who's enrolled today. And I'm going to go to the next section, which is the first 30 days. I'm holding that for a month from now. I'm just looking here if there's anything I've missed. Well, you get copies of this presentation. I would love to share copies. So let's connect on that. And again, I'm going to put my connections in LinkedIn. I'm the only Declan Wood on LinkedIn, so really easy to find me. And if you have questions for me there, or you want some kind of follow-up, I would be very happy to talk with you. This is Darlene Oman. We've done this for a new ED. I think that's an executive director we're hiring. But what came out of it was that the staff priorities are completely different from the CEO's expectations. I foresee credibility and trust issues. So here's something really interesting. Thank you for that, Darlene. There's often a disconnect. Think of it this way. Leaders live in one existence, and then peer managers live in another existence, and often the front line lives in a different existence. And one of the hardest things to do is to realize that there's multiple companies happening in your company at the same time. It's like multiple realities happening in the same time. And so what happens is the CEO's reality, those are the most important things. So it's totally normal. They don't see the other realities. Their team and peers see one reality. The front line sees a different one. What's amazing about doing the exchange and theming it is you can actually look at the C-level and say, interestingly enough, here are your priorities, and here are the priorities of the person's team, and here are the priorities of the other teams they work with. I'm going to work with this person to create their 90-day plan that addresses all three. Because really, you can't be successful with just the CEO loving you, and you can't be successful with just your team. You can't be successful just with your peers. You actually need to be successful with this whole group supporting and understanding your priorities and actually being supportive of your learning. And so I think the issue you can have here is if a CEO says, look, I don't care what their team wants, I need this. Is this person successful when their team actually is doing the work that they're asking to do, and they won't be successful without that? So I think it's, again, managing that whole dynamic becomes really important for us as we're onboarding, which is that the onboarding first 90-day plan has to be inclusive of all the different groups that are important for this person to be successful. I see David, this is helpful. I plan to share with a number of my clients. Some have Thoughtexchange, some who don't. Okay, thank you for that. This session has been valuable. Will the upcoming sessions contain the same information and material I'd like to send to my colleagues so they can hear what I have? We have a recording of this going, so there will be a recording, and that's for you, Lisa. If they've missed it, you can have the recording. It's kind of like being a streaming service. They can watch that one and then come to our next one. So all they need to do is sign up for it so that we can reach out to them. And I will post on my LinkedIn as well when we have our reg page ready. So I'm at the end today. I want to thank everybody for joining. I'm really thought we got a lot done. I'm really excited with the exchange. I will respond to anything in the exchange that I did not respond to at this point. So I can go in and put the answers and share out the materials to you. So all the questions will get responded to. If you have any suggestions or recommendations, I'm coming back in a month to talk about the first 30, and I'll be featuring Libby at that time, who will have now been with us in a month as time 30 days. And I'm excited to be back with you. So ping me on LinkedIn. Feel free to respond in the chat. I will stay and check on it. And also, I'm just excited to hope to get to see you again in 30 days so we can do a live case study together. Thank you, everybody.